Good evening. We're going to get started. It's 7:37, and we're here for the regularly scheduled September 27th meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission. Mr. Petto, could you please give the opening statement?
Sure. This is a regular meeting of the Montclair Historic Preservation Commission. Notice has been given in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act by posting a copy of the notice on the first floor of the municipal building and sending a copy to the Montclair Times, Star Ledger, and Herald News. Chair Bennett is excused this evening. Vice Chair Hyman?
Present.
Mr. Greenbell?
Here.
Mr. Rooney?
Here.
Ms. Kane-Levy?
Here.
Mr. Reimnitz is excused this evening. Ms. Gillette?
Present.
And Mr. Connolly?
Here.
And Mr. Angela will be late this evening.
So getting started, the first item of the agenda is the approval of the minutes. Since the last regular meeting we had, including the last regular meeting, we had a special meeting on September 17th. So let's start with the August 23rd minutes that were in the packet. Are there any amendments or revisions?
The 23rd?
August 23rd.
Oh, August 23rd, okay. I was not present for that meeting.
Where was I?
Ms. Gillette?
I have no
Mr. Rooney?
comments.
Okay, so I guess
Move to approve.
Second.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Well, do I abstain?
Yeah, two abstentions.
2 abstentions.
And then moving on to the September 17th draft minutes. Are there any amendments or
I'm
revisions?
just trying to find what I did there with it. Is this it? No. Did you take it?
No,
Oh,
but you can see mine.
I mean, I highlighted some sections. Bear with me 1 second. I want to look through it real quick. Again. Okay, let me look at yours real quick. Have you reviewed it?
I've reviewed it. I don't have any comments.
Okay. I think it's fine.
Can I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Second?
Aye. Second.
I abstain. I wasn't there.
Abstain. Okay.
Abstain.
Abstaining. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
With 2 abstentions.
Not for that one. No, you won't have to do it otherwise.
Oh, you didn't, you weren't at the beginning.
All right, the next item of the agenda is committee reports. Do we have anything to report on the Design Review and Redevelopment Committee?
The only thing I can comment on, and Stephen, you can correct me, is we're still waiting for any kind of, and Carolyn, you're involved in this, aren't you?
No.
The garage?
Jenny is.
I am, yeah.
The garage.
Yep.
I met by myself a few weeks ago to look at what they're doing at the hotel.
Oh, yes.
And because they're using a kind of an EFS product on the hotel, and I talked to the project manager there, and we discussed, and I think we're going to get this, is a product that does not include EFS at all. It's a, it's like a concrete sheetrock that they'll cover in stucco, and there's another layer in between that keeps it waterproof.
And that's what they had installed on.
It's something that we came up with when we were
Oh, you,
standing there
like,
looking at it.
you spoke
Because
of-
using all the different products that they had.
Okay. So we still don't exactly know what it might look like,
We
but
don't
it'll look
quite
like stucco,
know.
probably.
We don't quite know, yeah.
Yeah,
but
or what the
I think we're
details
getting
are.
something the next week or so.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea what the central core structure is, what that material is?
Structural sheet, concrete
It'll be
sheetrock.
like a-
And then, but you said there was something between that?
There's
some sort of
a
water.
waterproofing layer,
Okay.
and then on top of that stucco.
And then Eric Marin was just a little behind. He was going to be evaluating some stuff too, but hadn't gotten a chance to
Yeah,
get back
Eric
to us.
was there and Ira Smith was there. So
Okay.
Oh, that's good.
We talked
Yeah.
about it.
So I think we're still waiting for
You're
more.
waiting for what it is, but it's promising.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't include EFS.
Right. Right. Right.
It doesn't include styrofoam.
There's no foam involved.
Right.
But I assume it'll still have those same kind of the flashing details.
Probably not.
Probably not.
No, don't think so. Because it's not, if you keep the whole thing enclosed,
Yeah.
then there's no
Then there's
reason.
no reason to weep the water. Okay.
And it'll, it's basically, aluminum or whatever it is, 2x4s, steel 2x4s, and you put
Holding it
something
up.
on it and cover it up. And they kept putting on EFS, and I kept explaining, we're not doing anything that's temperature related. Nothing. So that's
Okay.
like an extra layer. So
Okay.
we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see if it works.
All right. I like moving forward in ways that don't seem bad.
No. No. It's not
That would
great,
be progress.
but it's not bad.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So more information to come.
Yeah.
Anything else?
And then we didn't meet as a committee, but John Remnitz and I met with the project on Bloomfield Avenue, the terracotta building at the corner of Grove, and
Mhm.
we discussed the amount of terracotta that was going to be replaced, and they've identified a source, and so it seems to be moving forward.
And to follow up on that, I don't know, Caroline, were you aware of, we had kind of an emergency last-minute meeting on Tuesday of this week?
Oh.
To follow up. So
Oh.
I got a call from the
Wow.
owner of that building early Tuesday morning, who was frantic and said, my terracotta guy from New Hampshire is here today.
Oh.
Can somebody meet? So
Oh.
John, Kathleen, and I met quickly at 2 o'clock in the afternoon with the terracotta expert from New Hampshire and the building owner and the project designer, Tom Reynolds, to discuss it in more detail. So I think there was another follow-up conversation that we had. He presented a sample of the terracotta that they're going to use. He was excellent. He took some molds. He did some mold
Wonderful.
work.
Wow.
So he's going to start preparing and fabricating the replacement pieces. And
So more
Okay.
promising news.
Yeah.
This is a cheerful meeting so far.
yeah, so just to add to Caroline's comments.
Anything from the Education and Outreach Committee? Nominations Committee?
No.
Minor Applications Review Committee. I do have something to report. We reviewed 4 applications for signage and awning, all pretty standard. And Graham, I believe those were all approved. Any conditions?
Yes, yeah, with conditions.
Okay.
Yeah. And those certificates are available on the.
Okay, great. Any other committees? Those are the standing committees. Is there anything else that anybody wants to report on? No? Okay. Moving on to old businesses, none. Resolutions, none. So we're going to start new businesses. The first application is a referral from the Board of Adjustment, application 2569, 112 Forest Street, Astro Realty Association, LLC.
That's the one I don't.
Good evening.
Do you have any of that? I don't have
The drawings here?
I was not here.
Can you state your names for the record, please, and your association with the application?
Kevin Costello, representing the applicant.
Paul Sionis, architect.
And I'll swear you in. Do you swear or affirm to testify to this commission to the best of your ability, or truthfully and accurately to the best of your ability?
Yes.
Sure is.
Yes.
Okay. And so
That's one I didn't have.
I don't have any of
this, the
Yeah,
subject
just
prop.
Before we get started, this was distributed in the packet for the August meeting. So
Yes.
for the benefit of any commissioners who don't have anything, I have a couple of extra copies.
that. You can share one.
Which is that?
Yeah, this
referring
is,
to?
yeah, this
This?
wouldn't have been in this packet. It's 112 Forest Street.
112 Forest Street. There's a 68 Forest Street.
Right here.
Yeah,
So.
68 we have.
Okay.
Well, they should be in the back. Are we all out of agendas, Graham?
plan.
Are you with Veristanet?
Yes.
I want it.
Okay.
Yeah, I switched carriers.
Oh, you have, okay.
Do I?
That's one.
Well, while Mr. Peto's handing this out, I'm just going to go over this very briefly. This is a referral to the zoning board of adjustment that's being reviewed by the HPC for advice in accordance with Montclair Code, Section 347-142. This is an application to convert a previous social club use at the subject property to an eating, drinking establishment. The applicant proposes a small dining area and kitchen space on the first floor of the building with storage areas in the rear of the space. The applicant requests a variance to permit a variance under Section 347-47, that's the use variance, and then a C1 variance under Section 347-101 to waive the parking requirement of one space for every 3 seats. The current site has no on-site parking. The subject property at 112 Forest Ave is mapped as block 3301, lot 25 on the township tax maps. The subject property is an interior lot with 2 half-story residential building with a 1-story commercial extension on the front. The property is located on the western side of Forest Street between Friendship Place and the south, to the south, and Rand Place to the north. The property is approximately 3,050 square feet with about 30 feet of frontage along Forest Street and approximately 100 feet of depth. And the historic context is it's located in the Label Street worker housing area, a potential historic resource identified in the 2016 preservation plan element. The Label Street worker housing area contains several properties on Friendship Place, Fidelity Place, and Oak Place that were once used as worker housing for nearby Crump Label Factory near Label Street in the 19th century. And my last comment is, as we're here to advise the zoning board, our primary function and our primary concern is with the exterior of the structure. So with that said, Mr. Sionis, can you just describe the project for us?
So 112 Forest Street is one of 5 buildings along a stretch of Forest Street beginning at the corner of Label and Forest up to Chestnut that contain 1-story commercial buildings that seem to have been attached to the front of houses sometimes in the past. I don't know what year these were built, but there are 5 of them. 112 Forest, this 1-story space was the home of the Astro Social Club historically up until Willow Street Partners purchased the property. It still has a 2-family house to the rear of it. And the applicant has a application filed to the Zoning Board of Adjustment to convert this from the social club either to restaurant, and they've amended, I believe they've amended their application to be restaurant or retail space. Basically, they received the building permit months ago to replace the storefront that was there, and that's in already. They replaced the front, the door leading to the apartments, and that was it. And the drawing that was submitted to the zoning board shows a possible floor plan for a small eatery or restaurant use with the small kitchen, barrier-free bathroom, and storage space, all within the space that was occupied by the social club. As I said, the storefront work was given a permit, the work was done. The front door has been replaced. The door to the apartment hallway is not as shown on that drawing, so it matches the front door. It's a aluminum and glass front door that matches the door to what's proposed to be the restaurant use. On the drawing that we did, or on the photograph of the existing facade, we showed the potential for 3 locations for signage. One was the historical sign. There's a a metal bracket at the top of the parapet where there presumably was a sign at one time. The applicant's willing to place a sign there, and also within the 2 glass windows shown as number 3 on the photograph. They're allowed to do, or they'd ask permission to put vinyl lettering on the interior side of that glass. And then the last thing was to place the street number where the number 1 is between the storefront and the door that leads to the apartments there. They're not proposing any lighting for the facade of the building. So, anything else?
I think Paul mentioned that the door in the picture is no longer there. We got the wrong size, but it's now a steel door with a full light kit, not aluminum. We also did steel storefront in there. We had custom steel done to match the 16 Label Street project that we also did across the street, the Montclair Bread Co. building. So I think it's noted as like storefront, but it's not aluminum storefront like you would think. It's painted black steel.
Right.
Is the picture we're looking at here what is presently on site as built?
This was as of
6/11.
June.
So
Right.
everything's the same except that door that you just see as a solid gray
The door on
door
the right.
there. The door arrived. The door that's there today matches the one going into the retail space.
It has a glass opening. Has
Yeah,
lights.
they arrived to the wrong side, so we put a temporary door in there, but that's been switched out. It's
Okay.
primer gray now. We plan to paint that in the future, some complementary color.
Is the sign going to be a flag sign, or is it going to be against the building?
We're proposing to have like a, what do you call that, a blade sign? right?
The
Or
blade.
A flag
Blade
sign,
sign,
yeah,
yeah.
in the existing location.
Okay. Is the brick going to be cleaned?
Yes. We plan to, there's probably some repointing that needs to be done, and then everything needs to be cleaned.
Mhm.
You can't see it in the photos either, but we exposed on the driveway side, there was an old store for some glass there that had been filled in at some point, and we exposed that with the, so there's now some like glass and steel opening on the driveway side as well around the corner, which shows up in the plan but not in the photos. But that was historic at some point, but it had been covered up, and we
Okay.
put it back in.
So I see a note about potentially an exhaust hood in the plan. Should it be an eatery? Are you going to have ductwork running up this side? Is it going to have to be vented and?
Right, it'd be through the roof.
I'll-
It's a one-story space, so it just
So
come up
you'll be
through
able
that
to go
roof.
straight up?
Right.
Yeah, the whole front where the kind of the whole dining area is, that's a one-story building.
Right,
The-
okay,
the
I got it now.
two-family is farther back.
Thank you.
So this, the entire, if it was a restaurant, if I understand correctly, it's really only
Like 12 seats.
12 seats.
It's
Wow.
very small.
Right.
Yeah, there was some cooking apparatus in there when it was the social club as well. I think it was primarily drinking. There was a bar in there.
Bar and a kitchen.
But they did chicken barbecues for fundraising and stuff in there. There was some cooking facilities, though no hood in there. So it had been done before. We don't have a tenant signed or anything. We have a tenant who seems interested in kind of a fast casual concept. So it'd be small, but we think it would work. And there's a discrepancy. The application says for restaurant use, and then the zoning chart says restaurant or retail. We'll address that with the board, but we'd like the flexibility to do both. If a restaurant use can't work there, then we'd like to be able to do retail instead. But there's room for a walk-in in the back, and there's ample storage all the way in the back. It's just the dining area itself is fairly small.
Just to understand, so the variance you're requesting of the Board of Adjustment is for a change of use from a social club to a
Restaurant or retail.
restaurant?
Correct.
Okay. Is there a variance required at all for the parking situation?
Yes. Yeah.
I guess it's changed. Yeah.
So I'm just curious, since you have a relationship, you own the property
Mhm.
across the street, I'm just wondering if you have, this might be out of our jurisdiction, but maybe you have you have parking there?
Sure, I mean, that would be the idea. It's mostly, almost entirely daytime uses across the street. We own 107 Forest, 18 Label, and 16 Label. So there's a couple of parking lots in the immediate vicinity that we control. So normally what they've had us do is do, some sort of parking agreement between the entities to establish parking there.
But in terms of our purview, we're primarily concerned with the exterior.
Yeah.
And it's my understanding that most of this work's already been done. And the reason for review is just for the use and the parking variance, correct? You don't have anything
So what are
with
we
respect
looking
to specific signage.
Well, we can go through
or-
the consultant's report.
Mhm.
We covered the door. I don't know if Mr. Conley just wanted more details on the signage.
Yeah, that's all.
Well, and just to further expound on that, this is a residential zone, so there will be an additional variance needed
The
for the
signage.
installation of signage.
Right, there would be a sign.
Commercial
So-
signage is not
Yes.
permitted in the residential zone, so that's also
So
part
this
of
is
your
gonna come
purview.
back.
And I think that the commission does have some latitude here to comment on the exterior finishes of the
Mhm.
building. This is a use variance before the board. It's a pretty high test
Mhm.
use case, so if there are any feedback that you'd like to provide to the board,
Mhm.
you can make that. So I'd
So
recommend
this
that
is
you do.
after the fact. So if it had not had the variance, we would have had no input on the storefront.
Correct, because
Okay.
this is not an existing landmark district. This is just a recommended. Because of the variance, that's what triggers the review by the
Mhm.
Historic Commission. And the permit for the change of the storefront system was an exact replacement, so it's just
That
a building
necessarily
permit
wouldn't-
application,
yeah.
and
Mhm.
it's not a landmark district, so there's
Yep.
no review that's required.
So essentially, we're looking at this after the fact with the ability to now to maybe augment or modify what they've done based on
I think the board will welcome all comments regarding the proposed use and the configuration of the use and the appearance of the building that encapsulates that use.
So yeah, if you could just address the points outlined in Mr. Connolly's memo. I understand point one's been addressed with respect to the door.
Yeah, and, we're welcome to some input on signage. I think, we have in the signage master plan there, for the street number, it says formed plastic, but we would do like a aluminum extruded letter or numbers there with 112 for the address. The projecting sign, we're saying metal, wood, or composite. That really is kind of up to the tenant to decide. And if we want to do that in subcommittee or something, when we get a tenant, again, I don't have anyone sign, or if we come back from in front of the full board, we'd be fine with that. We also thought there was an opportunity for some signage at the top of those windows, but it could be bottom of the window. It's really, we're kind of indifferent. We didn't propose any lighting, but if the board feels strongly that it should or shouldn't, we're open to suggestions.
What about awnings? Is that part of the plan at all envisioned?
I would rather not do awnings. Open to suggestions to see something that kind of,
This is on the west side of the street,
That's right.
yes.
so wouldn't
Directly
really need
across
one.
from us.
Really wouldn't need
Mooring
awnings.
sign. Right.
Have you replaced the coping?
Okay.
It felt torn up.
We haven't. We will. We haven't done that roof yet. But the plan would be, we normally go darker on that,
Yeah.
to match the storefront. That would be the plan when we do the actual roof, which definitely needs to be done.
And then the size of this blade sign, you were saying 36 max projection, 48 maximum height. Is that zoning requirements? Does that conform to zoning?
No,
or is this
it's a
the reg-
residential zone, right? There's no.
Yeah, the applicant needs variance relief for the installation of the
any
sign, 'cause
sign.
it's a
I think he
residential
just
zone.
based it on, there's an existing bracket there.
Right.
I
That's
don't
what we
know if
based
it's a
it on.
historic bracket
Right.
or not. It doesn't seem to be, but I think he based the size on
Okay.
what, made sense for that bracket.
I would think that we would use the standard, what we would use for standards for signage for blades.
Mhm. Do you know off the top of your head what that
No.
dimension
Well, it's
was?
that, it's what's on here.
That is, so that does replicate if this were not a
Correct.
residential.
Correct.
Yeah, that's
That
the permitted.
replicates. Oh, okay, yes.
Okay.
Oh, that's up there in
Correct.
the requirements, I guess.
All right, any other questions before we open it up for public comment and then deliberations? No. Any comments from public? No. All right, so I'll open the floor to deliberations. Ms. Gillette, do you have any potential recommendations?
I Steve hit most of my points, and you guys did too. If you could paint the doors, you said that's just primer gray. I would like for it to match the rest of the storefront would be great. I think cleaning the masonry facade would be fantastic, replacing the coping when you do it also. Just kind of restoring the character that's existing in terms of color and tone would be great. And then the recommendation to, when you come back, I mean, we'll see the signage, even if it's a variance. Maybe not.
So you can make that request. This is
Oh.
not a local historic district.
Okay,
so the
because it's
signage
not, even
is
if
not
it would be a
subject to
variance, we
review.
wouldn't even be consulted. Well, I would like to make the
So
request.
you can request that
Yes,
they
I would
come-
request that you guys come back. It could be also a minor, I don't know
Yeah.
if anyone else would agree or disagree that it would just be a minor application to see that, but we would just like to review the signage when you have it,
Sure.
especially since it's this kind of strange 5-unit hybrid place. It would be nice to review that.
Mr. Greenbaum, anything in addition?
I concur with my colleagues regarding the cleaning the face, et cetera. The only thing I would say is that since it is a residential area, there's a bit of an industrial look in the building across the street, et cetera. But being that you're now on the side of the street with the residences, I'd just like to see any kind of ornamentation or signage be very sensitive to the residential area, i.e. perhaps using fabric and other softer materials rather than hard materials, just to be more soft and more residential in flavor.
Okay. It sounds like we have to come back and discuss
Yeah.
that anyways,
Mhm.
Ms.
Heidi.
Levy?
I think what you're proposing is fine. A rigid blade sign would be acceptable since you already have the bracket. And the other signs that you've proposed, I think are acceptable as well. And I think it's a handsome storefront.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add to this is that the previous repointing be taken care of, so it's not cake frosting.
Sure.
Cake frosting.
Mr. Connolly, is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, I don't have any additional comments. My comments were addressed.
Very good. So, what I've heard so far in terms of a recommendation, well, first off, it sounds like there's general support for the application and for the variances requested, with recommendations to replace the coping to match the storefront, paint the doors to match, clean and restore the brick and repoint, and request the signage be reviewed by the HPC, perhaps even the Minor Applications Committee. Do I have a motion to accept those recommendations for our memo to the...
So moved.
I just want to clarify one thing, just with your statement of support. I think that it may be helpful just to address the configuration of the existing building and how it lends itself to this use. It may be helpful or beneficial to the board to input some statement with respect to that.
Mhm.
So, in that the building itself is not really configured for a two-family
Yeah.
use, which is what the zone permits. So,
Mhm.
if you might want to clarify your statement, just so.
No, we can clarify that to include that, this building does lend itself to a retail or restaurant use rather than simple two-family residential. It does have a industrial look, an industrial finish to it that mirrors the structure and use directly across the street.
And I think spatially it's differentiated from the 2 stories
Yeah.
residential thing behind
Mhm,
it, so
mhm.
it's quite clear.
Perfect.
Okay.
Could
All
we
in
make-
favor?
could we- could we
Actually,
say-
I'm sorry. Go
Can I
ahead.
say one
Second.
thing? I don't know if this is something that we could ask for, but again, being in a residential area, perhaps some plantings, potted plantings in the front to give it a warmer feel. It's things to,
I think that would depend on the tenant.
Yeah.
well, I'm just trying to get across the idea that be mindful and respectful.
But you don't have any space for it.
Well,
You're on the sidewalk.
Yeah,
And
and if
you're
it's a
going to-
residential and people are walking to and from their houses, there's
Okay.
stuff cluttering. So, do I have a motion to approve those recommendations?
I move to approve the recommendation.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Brittany.
Thank you.
By the way, is there any consideration of a rooftop kind of dining if it was a restaurant? Or could there be a
Yeah, you're like
possibility?
right outside a resident, like that's
Yeah.
the living room of the unit above. I just don't think I can make it work.
Okay.
Moving on, the next application is a referral from the Board of Adjustment, application 2573, 40 South Fullerton Avenue, Willow Street Partners, LLC.
If you'd like, I can give a little bit of context for this.
Yeah.
I need to get the papers in front of me first.
Just for the benefit of the commission, I can just
Yeah, go
explain.
ahead.
So this application previously received use variance approval from the Board of Adjustment to subdivide off 2 developable single-family lots along Plymouth Street to the rear of the church. The lots are to be 80-foot width minimum requirements, which is consistent with what's required in the zone. The application was conditioned by the Board of Adjustment that the applicant return for final site plan approval, and that is the application here before you this evening. The applicant has laid out the final site with a modified driveway, that the driveway to the church parking area will be flipped and exit to the crescent, consistent with the board's approval as well. So all of those things are essentially already decided. The applicant is here to just show the final plans for the development of the site.
Mr. Costello and Mr. Sionis, you're already sworn in. Can I have your name for the record?
Michael Koop, K-O-E-P,
And your
with
connection?
the applicant.
Excuse me?
With the applicant.
Okay. And can I just swear you in? Can you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're going to give this commission will be truthful and accurate to the best of your ability?
I do.
And just for some historic context, the subject property, which is the church, is listed on both the National Register of Historic Places and the New Jersey Register of Historic Places. The church on the property was constructed in 1920 by Bertram Grosvenor Goodhue. Mr. Goodhue was a prominent American architect. He served as lead architect of the Panama, California exhibition in San Diego's Balboa Park and the architect of St. Bartholomew's Episcopal Church in Manhattan.
Oh, wow.
The subject property is identified in the township's master plan as a historic source, as a historic resource, excuse me. And as Mr. Petto said, that this was previously before the commission, and I don't know if you noted, but I believe the zoning board previously approved 4 residential units.
The zoning board did not.
They did not. Oh, okay.
The zoning board requested that the applicant comply with the R1
Ah, okay.
zoning.
So that's why it's 2 now.
Correct. That's why it's 2 single-family units.
Go ahead, Mr. Sionis.
So basically, as you stated, the zoning board suggested that the applicant conform with the zoning in the R1 zone, which is an 80-foot lot width. So originally, they had proposed 2 separate townhouse units with 2 dwelling units in each townhouse, so for a total of 4 units. Those were brick units with slate roofs. The zoning board turned down the townhouse idea, but recommended that this be 2 separate 80-foot wide lots with 2 single-family houses to comply with and conform with the zone. The application is going to require 1 front yard setback. The front yard setback requirement is supposed to be the average of the houses in the same zone that are adjoining and adjacent to this property. The church, even though it's 6 feet off of the property line, is not in the same zone. The houses to the west of this are 42 feet. So we have we're asking for a front yard setback variance to set these houses at 30 feet from the front yard. But the zoning board suggested that this would be justified in that this would preserve the church parking lot. So there's an existing parking lot for First Congregational Church on the church property, which contains 25 or 26 parking spaces for the church and the nursery school and the church accessory uses. Part of this application is that the driveway that's currently leading from Plymouth Street to the church parking lot that travels along the west side of the church would be removed and be replaced with a new driveway leading from the church parking lot to the Crescent. We've gone back and forth with the zoning board as far as the width of that driveway. Right now it's showing an 18-foot complying two-way driveway. The zoning board suggested that we could even look at a 12-foot driveway since it's a pretty low-intensity parking lot. And also in deference to the neighbors on the Crescent, to have a narrower driveway, which would allow us to have an increased landscape buffer between the adjoining property and the new driveway. By putting this new driveway in, we're decreasing the size of the MMO, which is the nursery school that's housed in the church, decreasing the width of their playground in order to install this driveway. So the application that's before the zoning board now is here tonight is for 2 single-family houses with detached garages at the rear of each of the 2 properties. So the property on the west has a detached 2-car driveway at the northwest corner of that subject property, and then the property on the east has a detached garage on the northwest side of that subject property. The house on the east side of these 2 lots is being placed where that existing driveway to the church parking lot leads to, and we had several constraints in the design of this for the last 2 years, and one is to preserve an existing copper beech tree. So there's a circle shown to the right or to the north east of that easterly house. It's a large circle with a lot of concentric circles. That's the trunk of the copper beech tree. I had met with Steve Shuckman, the town arborist, and he said that we should stay within the line of that existing driveway so as not to disturb the roots of that tree. So that each of the 2 houses would have the detached garage. They each have driveways leading from Plymouth Street, and the other constraint that we were faced with was preserving the existing large sweet gum trees that are on the street on Plymouth Street. So the 2 driveways are proposed to be located between the existing sweet gum tree trunks, and those sweet gums are probably 80 years old. So we're doing everything we can to preserve those trees. The houses are designed to be transitional, so transitional from the existing wood frame buildings to the west on Plymouth Street over to the beautiful stone church on the east side of this property. Originally the application, when we came to the Historic Commission last August of 2017, they were to be brick-clad buildings, but now that's been changed to be wood-clad buildings. We looked at some of the historic photos of the street from the Montclair Library. In particular, we found that the houses were wood-sided, and that over the years many of them have been covered with stucco. So we feel that the wood is in keeping with the context of the streetscape. The houses are basically 2.5-story houses. They're shown as 33 feet tall. It's allowed to be 35 feet tall within this zone, but we already have 10-foot ceiling height on the first floor, 9 feet on the second, and 8 feet up on that top floor space. So we feel that this is a good height. They're shown with wood or composite siding, and they're also shown with synthetic slate roofing, both for the houses and for the garages. We received comments from, I think, Margaret, who's Tom's partner, and we're in agreement with all of them. We don't take any issue with any of the comments. Since we received the comments, we looked at some alternates, playing with the windows, window placement, or for example, originally it showed casement windows with transoms, and we've looked at double-hung windows, very tall double-hung windows as an alternate, and we think that looks fine. We think that the dormers at the top floor look too small, so we agree that those should be enlarged. The material on the foundation would be a smooth stucco finish. That was one of the questions. I don't have the comments in front of me.
I think there was one about the bay windows as well, or a suggestion of considering a bay window.
On the ground floor?
Yeah, right. It was the first floor living, first floor front, I think, right?
Yeah, if you could you just, I know you've mentioned a lot of them already. If you could just go in order with the Mr. Connolly's recommendations, just so we can be clear what's being addressed.
I'll hand some 11 by 17 inch drawings out to show the alternates based on the comments.
You've made some adjustments?
Yes.
Okay. These are the one on the,
There are two different pages, so.
okay. I have alternate. I'm trying to,
I think you take one of
that's
each.
one, okay, one of these.
Take one,
Got
pass
it.
it down.
Okay. So this is as shown, and then the one next to it is,
No, those are alternates based on the comments. Right, so as shown, the first floor windows were casement windows with transoms.
Mhm.
Let's see. So the first question, to go down in order from the memo, was for the record, provide the siding exposure and foundation materials. So the siding exposure is 7 to 7.5 inches, and the foundation materials, it'll be a parged foundation, so a smooth stucco finish on the concrete foundation. What is the foundation material? So it will be concrete with a parged finish. Window proportion and organization of openings should create a more unified appearance. So the architect may want to consider a projecting bay to articulate the living areas on the first floor, front elevation, in lieu of the ganged windows as indicated. So on the original proposal, it showed 4 ganged tall casement windows with transoms above. And so the 2 alternates I passed out were looking at tall double-hung windows. And then the other alternate that is not shown, but for discussion, is if we wanted to do a projecting bay. And I think
a projecting bay, where
in lieu of that large living room window,
the
front
floor,
left.
that
Yes.
would be a bay as an alternative to the 2 higher windows, which is the alternate we're looking at now.
In lieu of either the original proposal or the 2 alternates with the tall double hungs.
So it'd be a third option.
Correct.
Okay.
And the bay, Tom, do you have a strong feeling if it's a box bay or
No, I do not.
okay.
Yeah, I think this is definitely an improvement over what you have.
Yeah.
You're headed in the right direction.
Right. So we'd considered the bay discussion, and it could
Yeah, no,
certainly
I
be a
agree.
box bay, or it could be a.
What other change was there between this and the alternate besides the windows? Is there something else?
The dormer on the top are slightly larger. The windows, the dormer windows, slightly larger. It shows a projecting sill under that dormer window, which is not shown on the original.
A projecting sill?
A sill, like a window sill on the exterior, on that top floor. On the front elevation, there are 2 dormers.
I see those, yeah, but they seem to have been there in both versions.
Different size.
Not on the original, though, sorry.
Oh, not? in-
Not on the original proposal.
I see.
So this is, let's see. Next comment, letter D, was a string course could be added below second floor window sills to create a hierarchy in the elements of the facade. We didn't, I mean, we did a sketch of that. We didn't think it added anything, so we did not show that. Window pane size should be similar between all windows and should be vertically proportioned. I think we did that with the alternate. We looked at getting the window pane sizes similar. F, if the bay is not an option, the first floor window would be more traditional as taller openings rather than transoms. Note that most American house styles use sash windows with proportions that relate to all windows and doors in the building. So that's where we looked at the tall double hung windows, tall sash windows. Recognizing the preference for casement windows, we don't have, so Mike is the partner in the project. I think you said you don't have a preference for casement windows, correct?
Yeah, we're fine with the double hung window.
Dormers should be sized in relation to windows below. So we've increased the dormer window slightly, but I believe the dormers could still increase in height to look better. Face of the parapet over the wing shall align with face of corner board below. So that refers to the, well, on the front elevation, the top cornice, it protrudes out to the, as you looked at that front south elevation, protrudes out to the left. And I believe this is indicating that, correct me if I'm wrong, but
You got it.
come in a little bit, right?
No, go out.
Go out more.
Right.
Yeah. I
Which was
agree.
this?
So,
Yeah, this is item I, letter I.
Okay, and just describe it on the picture.
So there's a heavy built-up cornice on here. It's a little over 3 feet tall. So the suggestion is to
I'm not talking about the cornice, the actual, the balustrade that you
the
have. Right.
balustrade.
Yes, yes.
You're talking about the fretwork? The decorative wood railing?
Yes, the balustrade.
What did
Okay.
you ask? I'm
It
sorry.
Oh, to
needs
line
to
up
be-
with the corner. Thank you.
Yeah,
Oh,
that makes sense.
Pull it out a little bit.
Yeah,
That's right.
I'm sorry.
It should align with the corner board
Exactly.
below.
Oh, yeah, what you did.
Yeah, it should line up with the center of the corner board. To look,
Can I ask you a question about that real quick? Am I able to ask you a question at this point? Since we're on the
He's got
balustrade?
two more.
Yeah, let's
All right, finish
push
your few
through.
points and then I'll ask you.
okay. Chimney firebox section of exterior chimneys should be reduced. Historically, the firebox is 1/3 the height of chimney, and typically the chimney cap is simply detailed. So this is on the side elevation.
Not in the revised.
This guy.
That's
It's
right.
shown on the original, not on the revised?
It's both, well, the chimney firebox shown on both, right?
It
So
should
on the
come
original.
down slightly.
Should come down slightly. I mean, it is exactly.
It's close.
It's close. It is 12 feet, and then the chimney's 36, so it's 1/3, but it visually could come down.
It'll save you a little bit of money, too.
Right. And then last letter K is that the garage doors should appear as a pair of swinging doors. Long horizontal openings that serve more than one bay are not typical for the district. I agree with that. So it was originally showing one large overhead door, like a 2-car width garage door. So that's been replaced with 2 single overhead doors in the alternates.
So just to be clear, I did review the set of these drawings twice already. I had a discussion with Mr. Sionis, and he greatly improved the overall design. It was much different the first time.
Right, the
And,
front.
I
right side
did
is-
generate this memo. I was away for a conference, and Margaret emailed it for me. And it looks like you addressed a number of these comments. My biggest concern was the overall composition of the front elevation, and you did take my comments into consideration, and it's greatly improved.
Right, Tom made a good suggestion to look at moving the interior stairway back away from the facade, which would let us do something nicer with the windows on the facade, which it did.
So,
Yeah, we shouldn't even talk about discuss
Right,
that. It's
right.
not in front of you. It's
Sorry.
yeah.
How many bedrooms is each of these?
3.
So I have a couple of questions and comments that were passed along to me by John Reimitz. I understand that the spacing and just the overall layout. There are a lot of factors that kind of restrict the placement, but one of the points that he brought up was in terms of the setback in that area. There are no two houses with a uniform setback, so is there a possibility that you can vary the setback between the two, so it's not, too
uniform?
Yeah, too uniform. And on that same point, in terms of the exterior facade and maybe even the window layout, vary the two buildings so they're not exactly uniform.
Mm-hmm.
That might help with the placement of the garage.
Yeah.
On the one house is a little too close.
Yeah.
So if we could.
This one can't go.
You can't.
You can't do this.
Well, I don't think it would make sense to vary the front yard if the houses weren't slightly different. I mean, they're symmetrical, they're a pair now, so I think it has to be either one or the other, if
So his suggestion is to stagger them, one being maybe a couple feet shallower than the other?
Yeah.
So if we looked at that, the western house is a little bit more constrained in depth because the parking lot runs at a bit of an angle. So and on the eastern side you've got the church, which is much closer to the street. So the natural, from our perspective, would want to move the house on the eastern house slightly closer to the street.
Right, and I misspoke before. I said that the church was 6 feet off of the property line. It's 9 feet 8 inches off of that southerly property line.
We also tried hard to keep some rear yard for a workable courtyard at the back. It doesn't have to be, the demographic and the type of buyer we think isn't necessarily your traditional family. Maybe an empty nester, young, otherwise professionals with. So we're not looking for somebody who wants the convenience of that location, not necessarily your larger garden, but we do need private space in the back to have the houses function well.
That's understandable. I think the general point was to try and vary the structures somewhat. So if you want to either do it with the facade or the setbacks, that's something you should to consider.
Okay.
Or in the windows too.
Yeah.
Maybe one being the bay and the other one being the double hung set.
I mean, I think that the bay works, in my mind, works well if it goes to the floor level, so that it's functional space in the room. I think it creates a nice, good character in the living room in that room if you do create a bay.
Yeah,
There is a downside. It will cover our basement windows.
Basement windows.
But I mean, I think that's a compromise we can live with.
Either one of the elevations, the alternate or the regular one, is fine. So you could, I'm sure it depends on what's going on inside of the house. But,
Right.
One of one and one of the other would make enough of a difference. Or you do a bay in one of them, or something.
So if I understand correctly, if we did a bay on one of the homes and the other one we moved maybe a couple feet closer to the street, that would be
Sure.
something, do a combination of both.
There'd be enough difference to make them individual.
I'm just trying to look at your.
I'm also wondering, I do like the double hung sash better than the casement, but I was wondering if you had explored, instead of 6/6, maybe 4/8, and I think that would help the proportions a little bit.
It also would help with how heavy that bottom sash is.
Yeah.
It's called a cottage window.
Yeah. Yeah, it's 4 of 8.
Any other questions?
Yeah, are we at the questions?
Yes,
Steve?
we're at the question.
So I have a question, and I don't know if this is a function of a distortion in the drawing, so let me be. My reaction to the balustrade, which I love, it seems to me that fretwork balustrade seems short, disproportionate with the height. Is it a function of just because it's set back that it has that illusion, or is it meant to be very short?
It was meant to be short. It's it's not a roof deck at all. It's strictly a decorative item.
Okay, it just seems very
too show.
small. relative to the, and the other question I have is why, I'm just curious, why did you do freestanding garages? Just, is that?
The original application had underground garages, so the original plans showed these two townhouses with one common driveway between them.
Right.
And then cars would turn left to go into the garage on the townhouse on the west side and turn right to go underneath.
Right.
It caused a lot of issues and possible drainage issues. Neighbors were concerned that we're creating, I think the word was a pit.
Right.
And then the zoning board suggested that we get rid of it and look at freestanding garages.
I'm just curious, why not have incorporated the garages and actually have like the second floor project over the garage? Just for, I mean, maybe you wanted to keep a certain square footage?
Part of it was zoning. You know, we're restricted by the width of the buildings on the lot to 65% of the lot width.
Got it.
If we added a garage, we'd far exceed the 65%.
I got it. So basically, it was
It's an accessory.
it's an accessory building, so therefore it didn't trigger the zoning issue.
Correct, and it could be 6 feet off of the rear or the side property line.
Okay, so that's it. All right, I just,
Yeah, that's, yeah.
because most people, I would imagine, would want an attached garage, and
I don't disagree, you know, but, you know, to Paul's points, I mean, there's a reason we ended up where we are.
And I have to say, though, in Montclair, the detached garages are the historic
Right.
No, that's
typology.
true. That's
So,
true.
you know, I'm pleased to see that this is a site plan.
what it might be nice, just as a suggestion, is to have like a breezeway with a, you know, a Tuscan column, like a pergola-type passageway between the house, that's all, but that's just a suggestion. But would
That
that,
becomes attached to the
Yeah,
principal
then
structure.
it becomes
Yeah,
one
we had
building,
all right,
unless it
What
doesn't
building
attach
was
to one of
that?
the two buildings.
Just short of it.
Right.
so maybe you could just,
With
I don't
the
know,
garage,
just-
the pool, they couldn't actually do the pergola between the pool and the house, they couldn't touch.
Yeah, that was the Afterglow Lake property.
Afterglow.
I remember that.
Same issue.
So maybe that's your workaround.
Right.
Ms. Gillette, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Oh, I have one other question. You talked about wood clapboards on the front, but I see it's composite siding. So is it a hardy plank? Is that what you're?
Our preference would be a hardy plank because of the durability of the material.
Okay. And what
And
is?
your woods aren't going to, especially remember, we're selling these homes and the buyer's going to be concerned about that.
Right.
You get a lot better longevity out of the, like a hardy plank, and I think if we're sensitive to the color, you know, and with the right lap, I'm not sure that you will notice the difference.
I know hardy plank comes in like a embossed finish with the
Or
grain and
smooth.
the smooth, and I would suggest the smooth.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
We 100% agree with
I
that.
agree with that.
And the lapping of it, do you have that already specified?
7 to
Seven
7
to 7.5 inches.
Okay. Sometimes, I can't really tell from this, sometimes they're so tight, it just doesn't look right. I like it wider, personally.
Right.
Wider, so that,
We agree with that.
What was the thing that you said about putting in a relief
Street
line?
course, yeah, it sounds like they had tried that and it didn't add anything.
But you could do that with a smaller, put in a smaller lap. I've seen
So the
this done
siding exposure,
occasionally.
again, well, historically,
It's really easy.
traditional buildings would have had a wider exposure, siding
Mhm.
exposure. Yeah, that was a suggestion, I wasn't sure if that was going to
Right.
actually work.
Well,
or not. I think it maybe if the building was taller.
Did you
I-
That was
I
gonna
just
be
get
my
concerned that it looks a
comment.
little busy on
Yeah.
on this
That was going to be
No,
my
I-
comment. Yeah, I think it's a bit short of a house for a string course at that level as well. And yeah, I'd keep the exposure at 7, 8 or bigger, make it at least look like it was wood.
would you consider, just as, this is again suggestion, but would you consider for like the center window, if you're looking at the doorway, you go to the next window, go to the second floor, doing like a round window? Because that looks like it goes into the bedroom. Could be very
Round?
interesting.
Round?
Yeah, round with
No,
mullions,
no,
yeah,
that's in a bathroom or a hallway.
it would be nice. Just to break, you know, give it a
No,
little more.
no.
Yeah, we originally had looked at that, David, and this looks a lot better.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the more simplified,
Yeah.
Right.
the better.
No, it's generally very nice.
moving on, any questions or comments from the public on this application? If not, all right, we're going to open it up for deliberations. Start with Mr. Rooney. Do you have any comments, recommendations?
Not anything more than I already said, actually.
Ms. Kane-Levy?
Not more than what I said either, although, Mr. Connolly, when the comment I made about the...
The Muttons is 6/8. Yeah, I would like to see-
4/8.
Four over eight,
yeah.
but the same proportions as the windows
Or 8
above,
over
unlike
4.
the casements,
So-
unlike the transom encasements, which were a little different.
Yeah, that may work. We'd have to see.
So recommend exploring, is that 4
It's-
over 8?
Yeah.
At the first floor.
It could be the other way around, 8 over 4.
It could be the alternate for the, if you're
That's the
turning into two
cottage.
houses.
Yeah.
So it can actually lift that
Different.
lower.
I don't think, I think more the transom.
I do just want
Okay.
to agree with what Caroline said a little earlier about if they're going to be the same, if they're a pair, they're a pair, and if they're not, they're not. And I just want to, I'm cautious about some of our recommendations because I'm afraid we might just be doing too few differences. I'm afraid it's going to look neither here nor there. So this isn't really a, I don't have the answer right now, but I'm just, I'm expressing concern over some of our recommendations here.
That's the deliberation part, so let's talk
Aren't we in the
about-
deliberation part? Yeah. I'm
So,
bringing it up.
Yeah, there were some
There were
comments
some
during the
suggestions, and I'm not
questions
sure that they're aggressive enough differences that I would feel that they would look like, two complementary patchwork as opposed to ones that are just like a little different in a weird way. So I'm not sure.
I personally have no problem with them matching. There's a certain symmetry, and they're almost like townhouses. I mean, it doesn't bother me.
I mean, they're the same scale. They have the same basic distribution, even if we vary the window type. They have the same relationship to the same scale garage, even though one's a little bit closer. They have the same, yeah, I mean, I'm feeling that it's a lot easier to see them as a pair than it is to introduce minor. Although I am sensitive to Mr. Remnant's comment that the neighborhood in general shows more variation. I'm just not sure that we could achieve that feeling without really going to town on this stuff, so to
We
speak.
can't legislate it. We'd have to leave that up to you. But I'm perfectly content, me personally, content with the symmetry. They both have projections on opposing sides. They have opposite projections. They just seem to flank each other nicely.
Well, I'm not even sure that I'm suggesting that they're identical either. I just want to be restrained in our variation enough that they still feel like a pair.
Right.
That it's more of a consonance than a dissonance, so to speak.
I agree.
Because the similarities are pretty strong, and I think that works. I mean, I think that really does work. So I think even if you did have a bay in one and the symmetrical windows in the other, that would even be, they would be of the same language, the same division, the same light divisions, the same proportions and things like that.
Well, often in developments in Montclair, there might be similar houses, all done by the same builder, but they're all different.
Yeah, like
So-
my street.
A lot of streets are like
Yeah.
It's my
there are
street.
some-
Yeah.
Dutch colonials,
So I'm not sure what my resolution, so to speak, would be, but I think it's perfectly acceptable to me that these two feel like
they're a pair.
siblings,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
And I
maybe-
also just want to express it's just, I appreciate I looked at the floor plans a little bit, and these just does seem to agree that you could have more windows like this, this sort of more symmetrical thing too. So I just, I'm happy that this was one of the options, because it feels, kind of stately and measured and calm in a way that some of the other ones feel still a little off balance to me, compositionally.
So I'd like to ask a question regarding the driveway. I want to point out that originally the driveway to get to the church, if I'm not mistaken, came up Plymouth. And right now, what they're doing, just to help you, because you weren't here for the previous application, the parking lot is being added to the Crescent. So before, you'd enter from here to the parking lot, now you're going to be entering from the Crescent. And in doing so, you're going to be reducing a portion of the playground for the school. And I remember very specifically, as part of my comments last time, was whatever you subtract in square footage, I think it was 18 feet times what, like 30 feet or so, or more?
More.
Much more, actually.
Right.
So I think and I'd like language to go in there that whatever is lost to the playground is made up and compensated for in improving and making a better playground in the lesser space.
They didn't feel that space.
Right. I mean, the playground is dictated by the state child care licensing requirements as far as square footage that they need. So the church wasn't concerned so much about losing the space. They were over on their square footage.
Okay.
But what I stated at the beginning was that we're showing an 18-foot wide driveway, and that the zoning board, I think it was Mr. Fleischer, suggested that we possibly look at 12 feet, since their driveway's 10 feet now.
Right.
So I think...
And we previously had less greenery between us and the neighbor. We've increased that to 10 feet. I think you were at 5 or...
Right, we're at 5 feet.
And we've already doubled the greenery, the sort of buffer between the immediate neighbor.
Right, but I'm talking about the total square footage for the playground. I
The
realize that
playground,
there's a buffer on the other side of the driveway. So I'm just curious, the 18 feet as opposed to the 12 feet, you're saying that would allow for two cars passing?
18 is the township requirement for a two-way driveway. 12 feet is a requirement for a one-way driveway in Montclair. The church currently has a 10-foot wide driveway that they've had historically leading to this 25, 26-car parking lot. So we showed what complies with the site plan ordinance, but as I said, at the zoning board, Mr. Fleischer in particular suggested that we consider making it 12 feet wide, because they may not need an 18-foot wide driveway. And as you stated, that'd be 6 additional feet for the playground.
So right now, the plan as proposed to in the application is 18 foot.
Right, but we could amend that if this commission feels that way.
Well, I personally would was there a particular reason that you went for 18 feet?
It's the requirement. Right.
It's the requirement
Of the township site plan ordinance.
in order to have a
A
parking
two-way
lot of that
driveway.
size?
Two-way driveways are
Two-way
required to be 18
driveway.
feet.
Right, but does it have to be a two-way driveway?
Yeah.
Well, originally
It's in
you
and
could
out.
come off of Plymouth and up through it.
Right, no, I understand that.
But you're now not doing that
You're coming off Crescent.
as a two-way driveway.
In and out.
But it was, no,
It's a
Currently
two-way on
it's a-
Plymouth too, also now, but it's only 10 feet wide.
Right, so
Yeah,
it was
but
one
you
way
still
in, one
could
way
come
out.
Yeah.
Originally, and this is one way in, one way out. You've lost the Plymouth side is gone.
Right.
So basically, in the past, you had a pre-existing condition of a 10-foot wide driveway entering the same size parking lot.
Correct.
And now what you're suggesting is a parking lot, a driveway that's essentially almost double the width. And
Right.
yet, is it really necessary, other than the
That-
code?
Well,
That's
he's
the
saying
point.
no.
We agree
Yeah,
with you.
we agree
Right.
that's not
12.
necessary, but it's what's required by
We
the
would need a
town.
waiver, right?
It
Yeah.
requires a site plan waiver from the zoning
Yeah.
board to reduce the width of the driveway from the required
From
18
18.
feet to
So-
anything less.
Okay, so then,
So they're proposing they reduce it from 18 to 12.
Right.
And
He's
But we'd like your
Yes.
blessing on that.
Yeah.
I guess
yes,
is
I
what
would
I'm
like
trying to
to,
say.
I would like to
Sure.
give
So
the blessing on that.
Okay.
Let's move on.
I would, yeah,
Mhm.
anything Fleischer says, I'm fine with.
Me too.
Any other comments in terms of recommendations? Because so far, actually strike that. Mr. Connolly, I just want to hear from you really quickly. I think you indicated before, but do you believe that the changes that they've proposed satisfy?
Oh, absolutely. Everything in my memo was addressed, and I think it's an improvement over what was initially provided.
Right.
And so far, in terms of recommendations, we have the recommendation to consider the 4x8 on the first floor windows, the reduction of the two-way driveway from 18 feet to 12 feet. And other than that, I think that's...
Move back,
Excuse me?
stagger back the building.
Well,
We weren't going to recommend that?
Yeah, I thought that there was a consensus that we should
Oh, I
just
just
leave it up to
heard
the
about it.
applicant.
Yeah, I think we, go ahead, you speak as you. I think if you're going to make a distinguishing statement, maybe you can even do it in landscaping in some way, but the bottom line is there's really no reason. They match, they mirror each other beautifully.
Okay. I don't have any problem.
I mean, I guess my cautioning was less a specific yay or nay to a suggestion we had, and more just a suggestion that should you vary the site plan or the window location to keep them resonating with each other as a pair, as opposed to differentiating each other from each other too much. So I would be happy either way, moving, I defer to other people's stronger opinion on that, or not making a recommendation either way to move it, forward or back. But just, I think that they have much more, they're much more stronger as a pair than as two very different.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind moving the buildings slightly, but keeping them similar architecturally.
Yeah.
Would you consider, just as an idea, would you bow them out instead of being perpendicular to the street or parallel to the street, maybe bringing them on a little bit of an angle so you kind of get like
No.
an arc?
Our preference,
of the street doesn't
our
do
preference would be to move the easterly house forward a bit, because again, that church is set back 9 feet 8 inches.
Right.
And anything we could do to get further away from that beech tree would be
Yeah.
a help also. But we could pull that up several feet.
And then if we were to do a bay, we'd do it on the westerly house.
Yeah.
And
Right,
I
just
would,
keep it at that.
keep the houses similar architecturally and move the one.
And move that one
Yeah,
closer.
then
closer.
I think it makes sense to make that recommendation, because that would impact the
Yes.
setback that
That's-
they're asking for. So
I could support that, yeah.
let's add that, and then you've got the option to do it or
Mhm.
not.
That'd be great.
So we'll add that as a recommendation to, allow the east, the east building to have a lesser setback, to vary it a little bit.
Did you want to specify something?
The east house really makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just the east.
Specify
but
the east.
a
I would
dimension
specify
or something, leave that up to the board,
The dimension
I think
of it?
an additional 5 feet, so 25-foot
Let's say
setback.
5 feet
Yeah.
makes sense.
And 25 does make sense, because the requirement in the zoning ordinance is 25 feet or the average. So-
Yeah.
Why
So
why don't we suggest that we give them a minimum, or maximum, a minimum setback? and
Yeah, that would be
give
the
them the
twen-
discretion.
Yeah.
Say no closer than 25.
No closer than
Right,
25.
no, and then it's up to you, it's your call.
That makes sense.
Ultimately, we're going to trust in the talents and the pride of your work to do the right thing. We don't want to box you in.
Great, thanks.
So just those three?
Just those three. So do I have a motion to
So moved.
recommend?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bart.
Thank you. All right, and the last application on the agenda is a referral from the Board of Education, application 2578, 68 4th Street. This is Heidi Daus Enterprises, makes to expand a non-conforming use in an R2 two-family zone district, the Label Street Worker House Potential Historic Resource Area. Good evening. Can you state your name and your connection to the project, and I'll swear you in?
John Guadagnoli. John Guadagnoli, architect. I prepared the drawings for my client, Heidi Daus Enterprises.
Mr. Guadagnoli, can you raise your right hand, and do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're going to provide this commission will be truthful and accurate to the best of your ability?
Yes.
Now, the subject property is located on the western side of 4th Street between Claremont Avenue and the South Walnut Street to the north. The property is currently developed with a one-story commercial building. There's a small parking area in front of the building fronting 4th Street. The property has about 60 feet of frontage along 4th Street and about 213 feet of depth. It currently houses non-residential uses, including warehouse housing and office use. The applicant proposes to construct a dormer atop the existing one-story building and to accommodate product archives and storage for the existing building. The proposed dormer addition will be finished in stucco to match the existing building finish. The dormer will contain a total of 3 windows. And this property is within the Walnut Street Potential Historic Resource Area, identified in the historic preservation element. That area was built between the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The area consists of a wide range of building types, including single and multifamily houses, commercial structures, apartment buildings, railroad infrastructure, and industrial development. The area exhibits a wide range of architectural styles, including Queen Anne, Craftsman, and various 20th century revival styles. Brick, wood, stucco, synthetic siding, concrete, and terracotta are all predominant materials in the area. And the application is seeking a variance to expand an existing non-conforming use. The property was previously granted a variance in 1988 to locate a manufacturing and office use. Under the present application, the applicant proposes to construct an addition to the existing building, thus expanding the use on site. And I believe there aren't any bulk variances you're requesting, correct? It's just the expansion?
I did ask for a copy of the property survey this evening, which I believe Mr. Guadagnoli has, which we did not have on file. And I did get a copy of this electronically. The applicant does require bulk variance relief, sorry. The building is set all the way to the rear of the site, which I'm sure Mr. Guadagnoli will explain.
How do they get a commercial property in the middle of the residential district?
Well, that was
In 1988,
it was 1988. It's wild times in the 80s. I don't know if you've been watching the news.
Oh, yes. What do you mean? I was there.
Well, just to clarify on that, the resolution from the time, at the time of application back in 1988, it was a pre-existing commercial use since the 1920s.
Oh, wow.
So the 1988 resolution kind of just informed what was already existing.
Okay. Great. Mr. Guadagnoli, you want to walk us through the application?
Yes, thank you. Let me state the reason for it. Heidi Daus, she's a jewelry designer, and in fact, she's on Home Shopping Network all the time. She's the biggest jewelry seller on that network and has offices even in other countries. So this is like her headquarters. This facility is used for designing new pieces of jewelry. It's a design center, as well as they have a little showroom just for their clients, and they do administrative work as well. One of the other things they have to do is archive what they do. They have something like 11,000 SKU numbers. That's how many pieces have been designed since in the last, say, 8 or 10 years. So right now they're just overflowing with racks of trays with all this jewelry. It's not, that expensive jewelry. It's like semi-precious. It's not, 24 karat, but in bulk it is quite an assembly. So she requires just rack storage space, and the only place to do that, because she's busting at the seams, is to take a portion of the existing attic space, which would afford us the possibility of putting racks of jewelry up there. It will not be occupied. There will not be a stair going up to it. It's just simply a cleaned up attic. And the reason for the dormer is just to provide some headroom, because it's a gable, and so the sides are unusable. So for the building is 100 feet deep and 57 feet wide, and it consists of 8 truss bays. They're trusses, these big massive wood trusses inside. We're proposing using 3 of the 8 trusses in the back, so that and only on one side. It amounts to a shed dormer on the rear right quadrant of the attic. doubtful that it's visible from the street, but the neighbors would see it. You might catch the corner of it if you're standing at a certain, or else it's way in the back and it's only to one side. And there's a cross-section on sheet A2, which shows what the existing structural truss system is, and then you can see the additional headroom we're proposing. The top drawing, section A.
You're going to 7 foot 10 inches, is that what we're looking at?
Correct, that's at the lowest point, and then it just goes up to the ridge.
So you're adding a total of what, it's about 4 feet or 5 feet higher?
That's right, about 5 feet higher, yeah.
And this is facing towards the street or towards the back?
Toward the side.
The side.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can you just maybe, on like the site plan, just like shade where the dormer is?
Yeah, it's not clear.
I see this key plan, but I don't see where like the street, you could either draw the street on the key plan
Oh, sorry.
or draw the dormer on the street. Oh, on the survey? It's on, okay, I didn't,
Do I have a survey?
just here, you can just shade it in here.
The
I have that.
is like here,
Uh-huh,
and the area where dormer is there.
okay, and so the pitch of
Towards
the
Walnut
roof kind of
Street?
goes
Correct.
like that?
That's right.
Is
Okay.
it towards Walnut?
It faces
Or towards
northeast.
North,
That makes sense on the survey?
east would be
Towards Walnut.
The dormer,
towards Walnut. Oh, okay.
the dormer faces northeast.
This is, am I correct?
really in the
Oh, wait, no, that's Forest.
Anybody else need to, or you guys got it?
Got it.
So
Missing?
it wouldn't be visible from any public
Yeah.
thoroughfare,
Yeah, yeah.
correct? It's set
So-
back far enough.
Okay, got it.
So right here, this would be Forest Street.
That- Yes, but much
Yeah.
further down,
But
but
more,
yes,
yeah,
that's correct.
yeah, okay.
There's a parking lot, and then there's the street,
Mm-hmm.
which you can see on the survey.
Can I see one
I
of
would
those?
see the side of
I think the,
it, the windows.
Right.
is it running the
So
full
it's
length of
probably
the roof line, or
No,
just
it's
a
just a
portion of it?
portion of it. just
37
like
feet out of 100-foot length.
this.
The back 37.
Does anyone live in this house?
It's not a house, it's a jewelry design.
No, but I meant, but from the street, does it look like a house?
No.
No, it looks like an industrial building, sort of,
Huh.
set way back.
Really? I'd have to look at it.
It's stuccoed and it just comes to a peak on top. It has an archway in the center. You know.
Oh, wait a second. Is this?
Yeah, it's right next block over. You can see it from
Wait,
here.
hold on a second, sorry. Okay.
And you said stucco to match the existing?
Yeah, the existing building is like a semi-smooth stucco, approximately the color of these walls.
Okay.
And we would just be stuccoing just the dormer around, just to match it. Just put the minimum number of windows, just to get some light up there. And the resulting space will be essentially 3 bays. You're gonna have to walk between the trusses to get from one bay to the other. But it's just storage, so it doesn't have to be the best quality space, as long as we have a little square footage to put this.
Yeah, and this is set way back, and there are significant trees in front, right?
Yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
so
That's
there's
right.
very little visibility from the street.
It says awning in your drawing. Awning. Is that,
That's how they operate.
Awning
oh, it's
window.
an awning window,
Oh,
okay.
sorry, yeah. The reason we selected awnings through the windows is because you can open them slightly, get some fresh air in there
Right,
without it raining inside.
got it.
Any other questions?
What are the windows like below? How do they operate? On the first floor?
There are no windows on the first
Yeah,
floor.
the windows on the first floor, on the side of the building.
The building is only like 15 inches from the property line all around. It's right on the line, so just inside. You can't even walk around the building there's not a property there.
Normally in our historic guidelines, we don't allow or don't recommend vinyl windows. Can you put in aluminum or wood-clad, whatever, aluminum-clad wood windows?
Would a different kind of window be more pleasing, a double hung or something? Would that be something more?
I don't think it makes any difference,
I
because
think-
we can't see it.
Right.
Also,
I think awnings work just fine.
Okay.
or wood.
You can't see it.
Right.
So what does this look like? He's got, I mean, I know that it's highly unlikely that you'll ever be able to see it from the front elevation, but if I were to be able to look at a front elevation, there would, if I were hovering magically in front of it, I would see kind of like a pizza square, right? Of the dormer, because you've got the pitched window and then you've got the bump out for the
Like a
dormer.
wedge.
Like a wedge.
Yeah, it's a shed dormer, yeah, that's right.
So what's,
You can see it on sheet A2 in the cross-section, you can see exactly the shape. It's like a stingy piece of pie.
yes, like a not a great slice. So, yeah, but it's cut through in this section. So I was in elevation, what's that going to be finished with? Just the
Stucco.
same stucco?
Stucco.
Because I understand that in all practical real life, you won't really be able to see it, but in elevation, I mean, it is altering the front elevation of the building, but I think it's, even if there were no trees there, you wouldn't really be able to get a good gander at it. But it is, you are irregularly modifying,
Yeah.
quite irregularly modifying the roof structure of a building that would modify both its front and side elevation.
Especially its side. That's also why we did not build right to the end of the building, aside from the fact that, the setback and all, but we are keeping it like about 6.5 feet back.
Where's your 6.5 feet? This
Well, it's 5 feet, if you look at sheet A1,
Yeah.
at the top it says 5 feet from the dormer to the wall below, and then the wall below is about 18 inches, or 15 inches, excuse me, from the property line. So it winds up being 6 foot 4 inches or so. You see it's 5 feet,
3 feet.
the setback at the very top of the page.
Oh. Okay, I see.
See edge of existing wall below.
Yeah, so your side neighbor, so that's, yeah, the side neighbor is,
So we'll stay 5 feet back from our own wall, but that wall is an additional 15 or 16 inches, depending on where it's taken.
and are you actually, what is this dashed line here? That just, is that an electrical?
That's the ridge.
That's the ridge.
That's the ridge, so your dormer is actually extending past it?
No, it doesn't. It was a little confusing there. That's the space inside of the attic where the
That's a
wall
wall.
is located. Yeah, so that's
That's
the
a-
dormers.
Okay, so this isn't really
The dormer ends at the ridge.
Correct, that's right. It starts.
It's not a roof.
from
This
the
isn't really a roof
To the right, correct. Sorry about, yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah, to the left is what's internal, that's internalized. Yeah.
Okay, you may have said that, and I just didn't get it. Okay. But on the outside, the dormer ends at the ridge.
That's right. It starts at
Okay.
the ridge and goes to 5 feet short of the sun. We tried to be as least impactful, least visible as possible. Just in the back, to one side only, as modest, as little as we needed. Did not want to get,
I think
gluttonous.
that's the problem I have with this. I think it's kind of odd. Historically, dormers do appear on sides of building and sometimes on one side like this is, but its placement is giving me a little bit of pause. It's just, not some, why not a larger dormer, maybe centered on the overall? Does it have to be all the way in the back? I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing it from the front. It's an industrial building, somewhat of a garage, and like I said, sometimes on barns or garages, dormers are typically on the sides of buildings.
And just to add from a planning perspective, that would assist in the request for a rear yard setback variance. Right now, I mean, the building is the dormer is essentially on the rear property line.
Right.
The addition, pulling it forward would help with your rear yard setback.
Oh, okay.
Increase to at least have some rear yard setback.
Yeah, the only reason we did is because there's the stair to get there is,
Well, there is no stair, right?
well, not stair, the pull-down
It's a
stair. It's an
pull-down.
attic. One of those, yeah, I mean, it can be located, I suppose, yeah. That's fine. Okay. I don't have the benefit of my client there, but I'm sure it wouldn't be a problem. It'd be about the same size, just moved up.
Concentric.
So the recommendation would be to center it? Would you go as
Or just
far as
pull it
centering it or
in.
just pulling it forward?
Pulling it forward.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind it, it's centered on the overall length.
I
Just
think
visually,
that would
if
go
you
a
could see
long
the
way.
side,
Yeah,
yeah.
that would go a long way in just balancing out what is feeling like a kind of an unbalanced addition. I'm not totally convinced you can't see it, but I'm not sure.
You might catch a glimpse of a corner,
You might.
standing it strategically, with all the trees, but you're right, I mean, you might catch a glimpse of it, yeah. You'll see it more, if you move it up, it will become.
It'll be
Mm-hmm.
further up, but it won't be quite so apropos of nothing.
But where it is in relation to the existing pull-down, that pull-down's towards the center of the building, so you still have that full height, right? Like,
No,
Yeah, the pull down has to be, well, it won't matter, if we get this thing approved, the pull down can go anywhere in
oh,
the
okay,
space.
okay.
Right.
It doesn't
It has
exist?
full headroom.
This attic space is not accessible at the present time? It's like crawl space?
No, you pull down like one of those pull down.
No,
like
this
an attic.
Right,
exists,
you
but
can move
it.
we're
But
just
you can
asking
move
they
it.
could make a new one.
Oh, they
Okay.
could
You just
okay.
move it.
Yeah, we'll have to move it up along with the addition, and we still get the space, and that's fine.
Yeah. I just don't know if there's like anything underneath that would prohibit the pull-down from being relocated.
Well, the internalized layout would make it awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would, but,
But you could probably just move it one bay over and have that really be the edge of it. I don't know. I don't know what the plan below.
Like warehousing space, and it's easy to get a pull down there. In front, they have the showroom, the
Yeah.
offices, that's why we just threw it in the back.
Is that where she works every day? Is that Heidi's main operation?
Yeah. But she's on TV in Florida, she's in France, she's in Montreal, and she's all over the place.
Right.
That's her head.
Is it open to the public, or?
No.
Oh.
She would welcome you anyway.
Is
But
it
no,
open
it's
to the
just generally
HPC?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think it's something to consider. I wouldn't,
I wouldn't
require, but
necessarily make it.
consider moving it forward.
Centering it on the,
Yeah, and if possible, centering it. Do we have any other recommendations? I figure we'll
Aluminum
open the
windows.
floor up
Aluminum
to
windows.
deliberations.
Oh.
The windows?
Mhm.
Yes. So,
Yeah, as far as moving it up, I believe we can. I'm not sure we can get it all the way up to the center, only because of how the pull-down stair would
Right.
work. But also, there might be equipment or something that would really requires that they're completely, redo. So I'll move it up, I promise you, at least 1 or 2 bays to get it
Okay.
away from that back. That'll help the thing that Graham mentioned about rear yard setback. That was
Okay.
a good idea, okay.
any public comment? No?
Okay.
All right. So can I have a motion to approve the recommendations as
Motion to
discussed?
approve.
I can second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
And just to be clear, we're recommending the variance.
Mhm.
And that is the last application on the agenda. Any general public comment? No?
There's no general public.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks,
Thank you all very
everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Records, oh my